everyone. We're going to review Peter the Great today. This is going to be in addition to the movie that you saw in class, so some of it's going to sound familiar, and then some of it might be a little bit new for you guys, okay? So first, let's talk about Peter ascending to the throne. 1682, he came to the throne, but he didn't take power until 1696. If you remember all those shenanigans with his half sister, and then he had a double reign with his half brother, and then when he finally died, because remember he was so sick and weak, he died in 1696, and that's when Peter became sole heir. Right away, one of the first things he does is he travels to the west. So he goes to Europe, to France and England and Spain, and he studies a bunch of different things. If you remember from the movie that we watched, he studies architecture. He visits factories. He visits art galleries. He studies anatomy with doctors. He practices dentistry. He works as a carpenter. He builds ships in a shipbuilding yard. He does all of these things so he can teach himself all these important skills so he can bring them back to Russia. So what he brings back with him, he brings back technical experts from different countries. He brings back teachers from different countries, soldiers. He brings back the nobility, noble members, back to Russia. And if you think about it, like, why would he do this? Why would he bring all these kinds of peoples back to Russia? We know that he wants to do what? He wants to modernize, and these people are going to help him do that. He also centralizes his power, okay, and he does this by doing many different things. We know he brings the Orthodox Church under his control. So now all those church leaders that had a ton of power before, now they all answer to Peter. This is just a picture of an Orthodox Church that no longer is independent of government. It's under government control. He also improves education, so he makes some changes. He simplifies the alphabet. He makes it simpler for people to learn the alphabet, and in turn, that allows them to understand literature better, and it helps them be able to read and write much better. Okay? He opens schools for maths and sciences. He opens engineering schools. He opens all of these academies to help Russia improve educationally and to become more culturally aware of what's going on outside of their country. He also makes social reforms. You know, one of the ones that most people remember is what he does to the boyars, how he forces boyars to cut off their beards and change their robes to make them more modernized, so they look more modernized to Western countries. He also forces boyars to serve the state, so no longer are they just allowed to hang out on their large farm estates. They play civilian roles now. They play military roles now. So they won't become just a soldier, they'll become a military officer. Okay, Peter forces this on them. He enforces serfdom. So those serfs that are tied to the land, they still are. And because now you've got these serfs tied to land, to noble lands, working the noble lands, the noble doesn't necessarily have to be there. And we know that he creates St. Petersburg, and he forces a lot of nobles to live in St. Petersburg with him. Okay, they're no longer out, kind of like in France. They're no longer out their estates. They're under Peter's watchful eye now. And it might sound kind of silly, but if you look at the bottom picture, Peter actually forces men and women to go to parties, to socialize with one another, and to dance with one another. Before, women and men would meet separately. They would meet in different rooms, separate rooms, and they wouldn't necessarily socialize in public at social gatherings. That was done just women together with women and men together with men. So that's just another example of how Peter is controlling the boyars, the nobility of Russia. He also forces the serfs to do certain things. He forces them into military service, so they need to become soldiers. They're the footmen. Okay, it's called conscription when rulers of a country or even sorry, that's the bell. The democratic society, you can have conscription where people are forced to serve in the military. He forces them to do that. They have to serve for 25 years. They also have to become laborers. So they're the ones that are doing all of these government projects. If you remember from the movie, he forces serfs to build St. Petersburg, and thousands of serfs die because of it. So they're out building roads and canals and waterways, and they're building St. Petersburg, and they're doing all of this manual labor for Peter so he can modernize his country. Peter also modernizes by expansion. He wants a water port for trade and for shipping. He creates the largest, one of the largest navies in the country, the first navy of Russia ever. He fights against Sweden to gain a port on the Baltic Sea. He fights against the Ottomans to gain a port on the Black Sea, which he does successfully for about 10 years, and then the Ottomans are able to take it back. But he creates two ports, important ports, to help Russia modernize and expand with trade and with shipping and making it easier or making it more accessible to get to Western Europe with these ports. The next step to Peter's modernization of Russia is to expand trade. He needs to expand trade in order to pay for all his reforms. Think about all of the things and all the modernizing that he's doing within Russia. He's gained two ports. He's in the process of building St. Petersburg. So what he does is he decides to adopt mercantilist ideas. And what mercantilism is pretty much when the king or the queen or the head government, when the main government, they control all the importing and exporting. So they can decide what they want to import and they can decide what to export. So he has control over this expanded trade. And just as an example, lumber would be something that they would export. Furs would be something that they would export so they can make money off of these things. He also improves waterways and canals to make trading more easily accessible to people throughout the country. So now you've got these waterways and these canals that can help you transport goods back and forth. He also creates trading companies to make sure that this comes to fruition. His last step to modernize Russia was to create St. Petersburg. What he did is he used all those people that he brought back from Western Europe, all of the engineers, the artists, all of the teachers, to create a modern, Western-looking city. And he did this with thousands and thousands of serfs. Tens of thousands of serfs drained. It was on swampland. They drained the swamp where thousands died, and then they had to build the city on top of it where thousands more died. There's a great line in the movie that talks about how they describe St. Petersburg as being built on top of bones because of so many deaths that occurred during the building process. So these palaces and these buildings, he wanted them to look like Western styles. So he actually brought in people from Italy, artists from Italy and artisans from Italy to create these amazing buildings and to create these amazing pieces of artwork. He wanted his palace to rival that of Louis XIV. If you remember the Palace of Versailles and what that looked like, that's kind of what Peter sees as his competition. And he wanted this city to symbolize a window to the west. He wanted it to be a window to the west. And if you think for a minute, what do you think that symbolizes? If you want to write it down, what do you think by calling St. Petersburg a window to the west? What is Peter doing? What is he saying about the city? And if we move on, those are what he wanted to do. Those are the things that he wanted to do to modernize Russia. He wanted expansion, he wanted trade, he wanted good education, all of these things. And of course, whenever you want to adopt something new, if you think what he did to the boyars and how he made them shave off their beards and change their clothing and how he made them change their culture beliefs by socializing together, men and women, in parties and dancing together. There are a lot of people who are very upset about this. What he did is he was very ruthless in his reign or in his ambitions to create this modern country. And this famous quote is what he said. He would have no mercy for those who resist the new order. So for the most part, if you resisted, then you were done. You were gone for. He would kill you. And he did this. There's a great example about how the Streltsy, which is the royal guard, this ancient royal guard that worked for the czars, they revolt against him. And what he does is he comes back, he executes all of them, and after he executes them, he throws their body outside of the palace walls for months and just lets them lay there rotting to kind of set an example. I mean, what kind of example do you think he is setting? Jot it down if you want, because we'll talk about it when we go over our notes. Like what is he saying to the people of Russia by throwing these mutilated bodies outside the city walls and leaving them there? Okay, so there was definitely a little bit of resistance, but Peter was able to squash it very quickly and very effectively. And these just pictures, more pictures of St. Petersburg. And then to finish, what I would like you to do is talk about his legacy. Answer this question: what was his legacy? If you think about all of the things that he did to modernize Russia, what is he going to leave behind for his people? So go ahead and jot down your ideas about that. And then consider this: Peter's legacy pretty much died after his death. If you think about all the things he forced on people, it's like they were done. They didn't want to do it anymore. So the nobles ignored his policies to serve the state. They went back to their lands and their farms. And the growth of serfdom, by him reinforcing serfs and making them stay tied to the land, he kind of fell behind other European countries. So it kind of worked against his whole idea of modernization. So you guys, if you have any questions or if there was anything about the screencast that was a little confusing that you want to clear up, make sure you jot it down for tomorrow, and I will see you then.